Already went digging for today's Morning Pitt. I was thinking about, all the different things we keep talking about with Pitt football in 2026, all the big storylines, all the big topics, this player, that player, break out this, and, need a big step-up season or all these different things. We've ranked a bunch of different stuff last week, but like I said, we're not doing any rankings this week. We're avoiding the rankings, but we do have a bit of a list today. But it's not a ranking. Don't make no mistake about it. We're not ranking anything on today's Morning Pit. We are talking about those storylines or those players or those areas of the team, the positions, whatever it might be, that we maybe haven't spent enough time talking about. Overlooked areas of the team. There's one really big one that we just almost intentionally avoid because I don't really know what to say about it. We're going to find some things to say about it today, and then a couple other key areas and key storylines and key points about this team that, for all the blathering, I should say, as a nod to the great Pitt Blather blog, for all the blathering we've been doing this offseason, there's a couple of things that we maybe haven't spent enough time on. So that's what we're doing today. We're catching up on some, I don't know what you would call it, underrated storylines, under the radar storylines. I don't know. I'll think of a good way to describe it by the time I get around to writing a headline for this podcast. But for now, we're going to talk about some things we haven't talked about enough. And that's what we're doing on the Wednesday edition of the Morning Pit right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's a funny thing that occurs to me every year this time of years. We're going through all our previews and getting ready for the season and, this preview and that preview, position preview, this and that, and, 5 questions and a prediction on each position, the transactions at each position, who they lose and who they add, the projected depth chart at each position. We even rank the top 5 players in the Narduzzi era at each position. This is how we go on our series of position previews all summer long. And we go through all the positions: quarterback, running back, tight end, offensive line, defensive end, defensive tackle, linebacker, cornerback, safety. Stop. But we miss a big part of it, right? We miss a big chunk of the team, the third phase. We don't really talk about special teams because, I'm not sure if we could come up with 5 questions and a prediction on the special teams. We could talk about the transactions, who came and who left. We could, I guess, project the depth chart. That wouldn't be a very long or interesting article. And we could break down the top 5 specialists of the Narduzzi era, but it's like, some ranking of Chris Blewett, Ben Sauls, and Quadri Henderson. I don't know. I think, didn't Izzy Abanikanda have a kick return touchdown in that 2021 game against Virginia? Am I misremembering that? That was a huge play in a game that clinched the Coastal Division title for Pitt, but I digress. We just don't really do much with it, but it's something overlooked that actually is a pretty relevant storyline, and not just in the, it's 1/3 of the game, and games are won and lost on special teams. I mean, all those things are true, sure, but it's pretty relevant this year because Pitt's replacing all of its specialists. I mean, literally all of its specialists. They don't have any of the kickers. They don't have any of the punters, who actually punted in games last year. They don't have any of the returners. I was looking at the return depth. They have one guy who returned kickoffs for them last year. Blue Hicks had 5 kickoff returns. Most of that work was done by, who was it? Deuce Spann had a bunch, and Kenny Johnson had 5. Deuce Spann had 15. Blue Hicks had 5. They don't return anyone who had a punt return last year. Kenny Johnson, Desmond Reed, Raphael Williams handled all 20 of the punt returns for Pitt last season. And so they are actually replacing a lot there, but they're also, replacing everybody. Like I said, Caleb Junko is gone. He was their only punter last season. He had 51 punts, and he's gone. They're replacing their kickers. Trey Bukowski transferred to Michigan. Sam Carpenter's gone. That's all the guys who attempted field goals, and Carpenter and Junko handled the kickoffs. I mean, they are totally turning over their special teams units as far as the guys who's, touched the ball. I forget about long snapper and holder, and no disrespect to those guys, but the kicker's gone. They're going to have a new kicker, they're going to have a new punter, and they're going to have new return units this year. And that's pretty relevant. That's something we probably should be talking about more than we are, because we haven't really talked about it at all. So what do we expect there? And it's kind of interesting because at kicker, Pitt's looking at having a competition going into training camp. They had 2 guys who pretty much shared the duties in spring camp, and they were both transfers. Sam Hunsaker transferred in from Northern Arizona. Antonio Chata was at Rutgers for a year, Western Kentucky for a year, and then the last 2 years at Western Illinois. And those are the two guys competing for the job. Now, who are Sam Hunsaker and Antonio Chada? Hunsaker went in 2 seasons at Northern Arizona, 15 of 22 on field goals. This most recent year, he was 11 of 15. He made 63 out of 64 point after attempts. He was perfect this past season. He made 45 of 45. Antonio Chada really didn't kick it all at Rutgers or Western Kentucky, but last 2 years at Western Illinois, he's 28 of 38 on field goals, 73 of 75 on point after attempts over those 2 seasons. Getting a little more into the weeds on Hunsaker and Chada. I mean, Hunsaker and Chada, Chada has more attempts, 38 career attempts, of which he's made 28. Hunsaker has 22 career attempts, of which he's made 15. Chada has made 3 kicks from 50 and beyond. He's actually 3 of 3 in his career at kicking 50-plus field goals. He made a 50-yard field goal 2 years ago and a 51 and a 53 last year. Hunsaker's only attempted 2 50-plus field goals in the last 2 seasons. He went 1 of 2 last year, made 1 from 50. Chada, not really notable numbers, 7 of 8 from the 20 to 29 range, 6 of 10 from the 30 to 39 range, 12 of 17 from the 40 to 49 range. So, he was, like I said, he was 28 of 38. You take out the 3 of 3 from 50 plus, he's 25 of 35 from inside 50. Not exactly a great number. Hunsaker is 3 of 3 in the 20 to 29 yard range, 5 of 8 from 30 to 39, 6 of 9 from 40 to 49, and then 1 of 2 from 50 plus. So he said he's 15 of 22 in his career. You take out the 50 plus, he's 14 of 20. Not bad, not great. 70% field goal rate inside of 50 yards is not tremendous, but it's a little bit better than Chada's 25 of 35. And the other concerning thing about Antonio Chada, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, if it's Chada, it's Chadha. I'm just going to say Chada for now and hopefully get that resolved. But the other thing to note about Chada is last year at Western Illinois, he started the season making 9 out of his first 10 field goal attempts. That's great. He finished it making 4 out of 9. So he missed 5 of his final 9 kicks in 2025. Didn't exactly finish that season strong, but he and Hunsaker finished spring camp strong. That open scrimmage that they let us into at the end of spring camp, both guys got about 7 kicks that I saw, 7 field goal attempts. Hunsaker missed his first one from 33 yards, but then he made 6 in a row from 49, 40, 36, 24, and 2 from 53. Chada also went 6 of 7. He made his first 2, 35 and 46. He missed from 49, and then he connected from 35, 21, 42, and 53. So those two guys both went from the kicks that I saw. They might have had a few more kicks while I was walking to the interviews that I didn't see, but when they really lined up for like a field goal period, they both went 6 of 7, and they both connected from 43 or 50 plus. Hunsaker was 2 of 2 from 53, and Chada was made his 1 attempt from 53 yards. So, I mean, I'd be lying if I said I sat here feeling great about those guys. They finished spring camp strong, but neither one of them was exactly automatic at their previous spots at Northern Arizona or Western Illinois. I do think there's that should translate. Like kicking ability should translate across levels from FCS to the FBS or to Power 4 or ACC, whatever it might be. Kicking is kicking. It's not necessarily like any other position where you're kind of going head to head against someone who's going to be potentially bigger, stronger, and faster than the guys you were facing at the lower level. Maybe you have a little bit more of a, you have to get your operation time down or something like that. But if you can kick, you can kick. And if you can kick long field goals, you should be able to kick long field goals. If you could do it at Northern Arizona and Western Illinois, you should be able to do it at Pitt. The thing is, they weren't exactly automatic at those places, and that's a little bit concerning. And so whoever wins the job, it's either going to be a guy who went 28 of 38 over, in his career, or 15 of 22. And more recently, is going to be the guy who went, I don't have Chada's last season numbers, 6 of 10, 11 of 17, 13 of 19. Chada went 13 of 19 last year, and Hunsaker went 11 of 11 of 15. So both guys with probably more misses than you would like to see. You'd like to have something very reliable there, and 13 of 19 and 11 of 15 are not exactly encouraging numbers, even if those guys had pretty decent spring camps. So that's going to be a big thing to keep an eye on, and I don't know what's going to happen there. Trey Bukowski last year as a true freshman at Pitt went 20 of 23. He missed from 43 yards against West Virginia, which ended up being a gigantic kick that changed the course of that game because it doesn't go to overtime if he makes it. He missed a 48-yard field goal against NC State, which didn't matter because it was a blowout, and he missed a 43-yard field goal against Miami, which didn't matter because it was a blowout. He also went 43 of 44 on point after attempts. So pretty solid freshman kicker, probably one of the more overlooked transfer departures for Pitt this season, but a guy who I think they'll miss a little bit because he was pretty good and looked pretty encouraging and pretty promising as a true freshman kicker in 2025. And we'll see what happens with him at Michigan, but more notably, we'll see what happens. I'm guessing Hunsaker will be the guy. I think they brought him in on scholarship. I don't think Chada is on scholarship. Let me double check my chart here. But I believe Hunsaker is on scholarship as a true junior, and Chada as a redshirt senior is not. They brought in a true freshman walk-on, Carter Genchi. They also brought in a transfer punter to replace Caleb Junko. Whatever you want to say about Caleb Junko, I think his biggest problem was just inconsistency. I think he just wasn't consistent enough. I think he was probably better overall than people give him credit for, but it's one of those things, and it's like a lot of positions. The bad ones really stand out. And if you have a couple of them, it feels like you do that all the time. So he had some real low points. I think the Wake Forest game in 2023 was particularly ugly. He had some kicks that probably contributed to them losing that game. There were a few things that contributed to them losing that game. Solomon DeShields getting hurt on the opening kickoff is one. Christian Veyer sliding short of the lead stick is another one. And, Caleb Junko's punting. He was generally fine. He averaged 44.2 yards per punt, but he also put 9 out of 51 punts inside the 20. And that, I don't know what you should be shooting for there, but I feel like more than 20% of your punts should be down inside the 20. I think you're doing a good job if you get more than 20% of your punts inside the 20. Caleb Junko last year, 17.6% of his punts were downed inside the 20. Just 9 out of 51. That's not very good. He also had 17 fair catches. That's 33% of his punts. I often think, when I think about punts, what's the best outcome? Obviously, coffin corner, pin him at the 1. Your best, most reliable, realistic outcome is a fair catch. I think a fair catch inside the 20, ideally. Ideally, you can get a fair catch at the 17 every time. Caleb Junko only had 9 of his 51 punts, down inside the 20. And he had 17 fair catches out of 51 punts. That just doesn't seem like a great percent. Maybe that's more of an industry standard than I think. But I feel like you should be able to do better than 33% of your punts. He also had 5 touchbacks on 51 punts, which is not too bad, but maybe speaks to his inconsistency because he didn't kick the ball far enough to get into the end zone. His replacement, presumably, is going to be Gabe Russo. Gabe Russo transferred in from Idaho State. He started his career at Auburn for 2 years. Didn't really get on the field at Idaho State last year. He was a second-team All-Big Sky selection. He was a FCS Punter of the Year semifinalist. He averaged 46.3 yards per punt, so that's about 2 yards more than Caleb Junko did. He got 17 of his – he had 38 punts. 17 of them went inside the 20. So we talk about Caleb Junko only being 17.6% of his punts down inside the 20. Gabe Russo had 44.7%, almost 50% of his punts. Damn close to half his punts were down inside the 20. He had about the same fair catch rate, 34%, 34.2% of his punts were fair catches. For Junko, it was 33.3, so roughly around the same number there. And he also had 5 touchbacks like Junko did, except he had 5 touchbacks on 38 punts as opposed to Junko had 5 on 51. Most of these numbers do favor Russo. And again, punting, like field goal kicking, should be something that translates from FCS to ACC because you're kicking the ball. You're kicking the ball. you got to get used to your new snapper. You got to get your operation time down and everything like that. But the talent is the talent. And if you have the talent, then you should be able to make those plays. You know what I mean? Like, you should be able to punt the ball well. You should be able to kick field goals. So Gabe Russo, by his stats last year at Idaho State, was a better punter than Caleb Junko was at Pitt last season. We'll see if that translates. They do have another guy, Cayman. I always mess this last name up too, Tijerina. And I apologize to Cayman if I mispronounce that. I only mention him because he arrived as a true freshman last year as a walk-on, but he was number 3. Corn Blue Kicking is one of these kicking services nationally that rates punters and kickers, and Cayman was the number 3 punter in the country in the class of 2025. I mean, it was good enough to get a walk-on spot at Pitt. We'll see what that turns into, but he's worth keeping an eye on. Incidentally, Gabe Russo, 2 years earlier in the class of 2023, was also the number 3 punter in the country, according to Corn Blue Kicking. Started his career at Auburn, then went to Idaho State. I feel like they're probably a little more solid at punter than they are at kicker right now. Feel pretty confident that Gabe Russo is going to be the guy there. Carry his experience from Idaho State into Pitt. He's a, what class is he? I believe he's a junior as well. Yeah, he's a redshirt junior, so he's got some eligibility left beyond this. They brought in Justin Schmidt as a long snapper, a scholarship long snapper. I forget. He arrived this offseason as a transfer. I forget where he came from. I can find out for you because I have the roster open right in front of me. Justin Schmidt, the long snapper, originally from went to Thomas Jefferson. He started his career at Purdue. He was at Thomas Jefferson, walked on at Purdue in 2025, and then transferred to Pitt this offseason. I would guess he's going to be their starting long snapper because they don't have anybody else. They actually brought in a true freshman, Alex Rudolph, who I believe is the son of Joe Rudolph, which is interesting. You remember Joe. But, I would guess, I think Russo is going to be your punter. And then I would guess Hunsaker will be the kicker. But that's going to be a training camp battle. And we're going to be talking a lot about training camp battles all through August. This position, that position. We probably won't talk as much about the field goal kicker, but we probably should, because these guys are going to be in a battle, and we'll see who ends up coming out on top. So some big question marks and a lot of open jobs on special teams. And like I said, the return units, they don't have anybody coming back. Blue Hicks had 5 kick returns, and that's it. Nobody who had a punt return last year, and nobody who had any of the other 20-some or 26 kick returns last season. None of those guys are back. And so some open opportunities there. I don't get as caught up in kick return. I feel like you find your fast guy, and it's more about having a scheme. And if you can have the scheme, if you have a good scheme, like with their new special teams coordinator, if they have a good scheme and you have your really fast guy back there and you execute the scheme and get the blocking set up, then you have the guy who can outrun the defense or outrun the coverage unit and turn it into something big. Punting, you need somebody who's reliable, going to make good decisions on the fair catch and also make sure they catch the ball. And so I think you can find those guys. I don't want to, diminish the value of a good returner or make it sound like it's easy or something like that. I know it's not. But you should be able to find those guys. There should be enough speed on this team that you can find good returners. I'm more interested in who's going to kick those field goals because while I think it's Sam Hunsaker, I think both guys have a lot to prove. So there we go. Anybody who's been looking for some special teams talk, we just spent this whole episode talking about. I had a couple other things I thought we were talking about, but we ended up talking about special teams the whole time. So it's something to keep an eye on, and it's something to be aware of because they've got some openings here, some open jobs that they're going to need to find some answers. And that's what training camp will be for. All right. Like I said, we're not having a live stream tonight, so just enjoy this Morning Pit this morning. Make sure you like this video and subscribe. Have a good Wednesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pit right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.